Before I entered the service, I was a high school student. I joined at 17 years old, and I basically did boot camp in between junior and senior year of high school. Came back, finished high school, and then went back again. So I didn't really have much life experience other than school, you know, before I joined the military initially.
So, graduated Hendricken, went to CCRI for 2.5 years, kind of meaningless jobs, restaurant, management, types of things like that. Got fed up and joined the military.
I went into the service right out of high school. So.
I was in high school. So I left, I graduated from high school. My family was a military family. My father was in the Navy for 28 years. So while my father was overseas, I snuck around my parents' back and talked to an Army recruiter because I wanted a career in medicine. So instead of graduating from high school and surfing like all my other colleagues, I pursued the Army immediately after high school before going into college.
I went in September of 1983 after graduating high school.
I was a student at Penn State University, did my undergrad there and my graduate work there, and then I went into the Marine Corps when I was 24.
I had finished high school and I was attending a prep school.
Let's see, I was working. I was a printer in Pawtucket, Rhode Island.
I was working for we had a macaroni or pasta factory, and I worked in the pasta factory. It was a family affair.
I enlisted in the Army National Guard in Rhode Island for 6 years, and at the end of that 6 years, I don't want to get too far ahead of you, but then at the end of that 6 years, I enlisted for another 3, and then plus with deployments and everything, I did about 10.5 years total.
So why did you decide to enlist?
At that point in my life, I just kind of wanted to challenge myself and see what else was available in like a positive, you know, as far as a positive influence goes in my life at that time, you know, teenagers, you know, and I was just looking for a little more direction and constructive progression. You know.
So did you want like a mental challenge or a physical challenge?
Both.
Both?
But just like a little structure for my life.
I decided to enlist because at the time I wasn't ready to go to college. Like I always wanted to go to college. I was a good student and stuff, but I wasn't ready to. I don't know. I didn't feel like I had the discipline to sit down and study and go to college that way. So I was always interested in the military as a kid growing up. So I decided to join the military.
I think there was good money for college because I didn't, you know, my parents weren't really wealthy, so. I thought that I could alleviate a lot of that stress by having the military help me through college.
I mean, I've always been very interested in the military since I was a kid. Like the war movies, all that kind of stuff, so there's a love for it.
At the time, I just didn't really know what direction to go in at that time, and had an interest in maybe being an aviator, at the time, and so that's the premise upon which I entered the Marine Corps to be a fixed-wing pilot, which didn't materialize because once in, they informed us that there was a 2-year backlog down at flight school, and we had to go into either infantry or artillery and get called down at a later date, or we could choose any other MLS in the Marine Corps we wanted at the time, and that's what I chose to do.
No, I went in during the Vietnam War and I was getting drafted, so I thought if I was getting drafted I would enlist and try to determine what I wanted to do rather than get drafted and have the Army tell me where I was going to go, what I was going to do.
I went in when I was 20. We had to go into service then. You were drafted. So if you joined the service, you went for 4 years. But if you got drafted, you only went for 2 years. But if you joined the National Guard, you went 1 year in the service and 6 months, like weekends and twice a week. So there's 3 ways you can do it. And I chose the National Guard because I didn't want to stay in that long. And but I wish I went the other way after, because I had to do it for 6 years after. It was 2 years in the service and 6 more years. Like you had to go every like 3-4 times a week for 6 years, and then you had to go to like New Jersey for a month every year. So you had to do that for 6 years.
I joined the National Guards in 1937, and so I was in the Guards when war broke out. So I went right from the Guards into 43rd Division Artillery, you know.
So why did you decide to join the National Guard?
Well, in those days I was only a young fella, 15, 16 years old, and no money, you know, my father was working, he was in it. So these 3 fellas, they were in the Guards, and they said, you want to earn some extra money? So I said, yeah, I'm willing to. So I joined the Guards as extra money. And we would be once a month for 2 or 3 hours marching in the armory and doing whatever we wanted to do, clean our guns and things like that. And 3 years later, war broke out. And I was in Blandy, Camp Blandy, Florida. And it's funny, they were working on my papers December the 7th. And while they were working on my papers, we got notice that war from Japan. So he pulled the paper out of the typewriter. He says, you're not going home. You're going out overseas. So that's how I stayed in.
I waited until they drafted me. But I love my country, don't get me wrong.
I was 1999. I was in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. It was intense. It was intense. The first few days, you know, is complete culture shock. And then, you know, as time goes on, you just kind of adapt and get used to it. And then the things that seemed like such a hill to get over just become commonplace, you know, as far as the way you're treated, the way you eat, the way you're told what to do, how to do it all the time, you know. It just kind of becomes common practice, and that's your new way of life, you know.
What was the hardest part of adjusting? Hardest thing to adjust to?
Ooh, at 17 years old, probably just being away from home, being away from my normal routine, being away from my family. Yeah, it took a little bit of getting used to. But then you're there with other people who are in, you know, same age group, same situation, same, you know, so you know, you kind of bond on that aspect of it.
More mental than physical. You know, they just try to tear you down so they can instill in you what they want, their values, their beliefs, and it's all for the greater good.
And where was your training?
Lackland Air Force Base, Texas.
Well, I went in November, from November to December, or till January, so it was pretty cold and snowy. As far as the weather goes, but as far as basic training goes, I was an athlete and things like that, so I was used to kind of a more structured environment, and people yelling at me and things like that. So it was actually easier than I thought it would be. It was the Navy, so it wasn't like I was doing combat training necessarily. So yeah, it was mostly just kind of learning about the structure of the military and then all this stuff. But yeah, I found it was kind of easier than I thought it would be.
Scary.
Mm-hmm.
My family's really close, and San Diego's a really, really nice town.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember leaving. These gentlemen in a uniform came to my home to essentially take me into the military, and it was like the first time where I'd ever really been away from home for any long period of time. So it was really hard, leaving home and then heading through what's known as MEPS. It's called a Military In-Processing Center. So basically that was like the first time where I saw that I wasn't my parents' child anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like getting ready to be put into uniform and pursuing a career in medicine. So, military. It was really challenging.
Mm-hmm.
So when I graduated from high school, I was like, I weighed less than most girls in my class, in my graduating class. So part of the reason why I wanted to do the Army was because I kind of wanted to kind of get stronger. So every day consisted of waking up really early, having breakfast at like 5 in the morning, and there was this significant, practice to run every day. So whatever we were doing, we were always running from one task to another. But we would do group runs at like 5:30 in the morning, and then the Army has like different tasks and lessons that you need to be able to learn as a soldier, and then that incorporated different physical activities. So you could be climbing a confidence course or a wall. You could be rappelling, which is it's basically a task where they make a chair out of rope, and then you're like some 300 feet in the air, and then you basically throw a rope down to jump down the wall. So, as much as it was very physically tasking and emotionally tasking, all of that came because of the fact that there were certain duties that they would want you to do as an Army soldier, so that it kind of made you strong without necessarily being in a gym per se. So.
I had to go to Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. Yeah. And it's supposed to be sunny San Antonio, and it was actually quite cold. It's very stressful, because especially first time away, that officially away. I went down on December 13th of 1983, so I spent my birthday, Christmas, and New Year's Eve, New Year's, all in basic training. It's different. It's a different way of life, of like, follow their rules, you know what I mean? Whatever you do when you first get there isn't good enough, and then slowly they build you back up. So, but being out of all the 4 branches, I think I had a very easy basic training.
About 10 or 11 weeks.
And was it easy to adapt to that kind of training?
For me it was. I had the mental discipline. I was athletic to begin with, so it didn't really pose any problem for me.
My first training was in Fort Gordon, Georgia. You have to remember, I went in the Army in the Vietnam War in 1966. So the Army then is a lot different than today's Army. Not that the basic training today isn't difficult or challenging, but the drill instructors that we had in the Army back in those days were all infantry trained non-commissioned officers, most of which had already served in Vietnam. My drill sergeant actually had served in World War II and Korea, and had been over to Vietnam twice before he was my drill sergeant. And they were all infantry guys that were the drill sergeants, were all infantry, and had all had pretty much combat experience. And they were allowed to be a little bit rougher on recruits in those days than they're allowed to today. So it was very challenging, physically and mentally.
How long were you in basic training for?
8 weeks. Well, in those days, basic training was all infantry. some went to schools after basic training. Pretty much everybody went to some type of a school after basic training. But in those days, you were an infantryman first before you went to your other training. So it was all geared towards infantry, pretty much more so than it is today.
That was fun. I had basic training with Elvis Presley and Jimmy Brown.
Really?
Yes, I did.
Wow.
That was fun. But that was in Fort Leonard, Missouri. Yeah, I was in the engineers. Yeah.
So what did you do in basic training? Like, what did you learn?
Well, basic training, you learn how to survive. You know, you got to learn how to crawl under barbed wire, crawl through mud, climb over mountains, climb over fences, and pull yourself with rope over different things. You had to learn all that, and you had to do it within a certain time. It was like an infiltration course, they called it. Yeah, and I went behind Jimmy Brown. He left me in the dust. He went through it like nothing. I was way behind. Elvis did not participate when I was there. He was in a different company. Like I was in C Company. C Company means Charlie Company. And this B Company means Bravo Company. And D Company means Delta Company. Instead of saying the name, you just say the letter D. And that's the way it would work. And he was in like entertainment company. He wasn't on the front lines. He just, every Sunday he would sing at mess hall or the PX. And he would sing every Sunday for the guys who watch him. But nobody would go. The place would be empty. Well, guys hated him because he had all the girls. And all the girls were crying for him, so the guys didn't like him. Not personally, but just because he was a singer.
I went to, I was inducted in Providence. They sent me to Fort Devens to be sworn in and all that for all the uniforms. But from Fort Devens, I was shipped down to Virginia. Camp Pickett, Virginia. Everybody called it the hellhole in the Army. But, I was shipped down there, and we went for 16 weeks of training. Like almost 4 months. We had two parts of the training. One was infantry, and the other was medical. We did the infantry first, get that out of the way. That's how to use mortars, how to use bazookas, how to use the 30-30, the M1. They take you out in the field, you walk down the field 15 miles. And when you got there, you positioned yourself with how you're going to fire the weapons. Oh, me, I always liked the outdoor life, so it didn't bother me that much.
I did the basic training, came back, finished high school, and then went back again for my specialized training. And it was actually heavy equipment engineering, heavy equipment construction, and that sort of thing. A little bit of fun, just driving around like bulldozers and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Where was that?
That was actually in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Very hot.
So, which part of it did you like better, the basic training or the specialized training?
Oh, that's a good question. Which part did I like better? I'd say the specialized training, because that's what you joined for in the first place, you know, and you picked out your job and that's what you wanted to do, and you know, so, and they were a little more relaxed as far as guidelines and talking down to you and stuff, you know. So yeah, that would probably come out on top as the better experience.
Yes, came out to be about a year. Geographically, I went from Washington State to Pensacola, Florida, and places in between. So water survival, land survival, gunnery school, aviation school. So a lot of little building blocks that when the Legos came together, it was my job, my career, what I did.
Yes, so well, for basic training I went to Orlando, Florida to do the nuclear power school. I didn't make it all the way through that program, so I went to Groton, Connecticut to finish up electronics training for communications and things like that for submarines. So,
and they sent me to Fort Sam Houston, Texas, where I was with other medics from all over the United States. And basically, you know, they trained the Air Force, the Navy, and the Army all at one facility. And it's in San Antonio, Texas. And then it's kind of like medical school, so you learn the basics of anatomy, physiology, and then you apply it to military medicine. So, you know, the military isn't always about combat per se, but the focus is on how to treat an injured military person, even though that person might be in a hospital or out on the field. That was kind of the, you know, focus of the training. So the medic training is usually about 16 weeks, and it focuses on just basic life support. So dealing with you know, different combat-related injuries, so airway protection, breathing, circulation, how to deal with certain kinds of wounds. And then now that I'm a doctor, medical school is just about identifying disease and then preventing disease. So it was a really good experience, because I think that it was those experiences earlier after high school that really kind of solidified my desire to be a doctor when I grew up. So
Yes, I went to Lowry Air Force Base up in Denver, Colorado. When I first went in the Air Force, I was in supply. So that was called the technical school. The Army calls it AIT, Marines call it Advanced Infantry Training, but in the Air Force it's tech school. I spent 5 weeks up there.
To do what?
I learned how to be a warehouse technician, storage. Then I cross-trained, meaning I changed my jobs. So I had to go to school down in Florida.
For
that.
what?
The official job for that is a tactical air command and control specialist. I called in airstrikes for the Army. So my next duty stations would be with the Army posts.
Well, we're all infantry people, just as a course of being Marines, but I also specialized in logistics. So I was a logistics officer.
So what do they do mostly?
Basically, it's resupply and distribution of ammunition, food, various forms of subsistence, medical support, transportation, different things to support the effort in a combat situation.
Well, nothing really in particular. I stayed in what I was doing. I got transferred to a couple different locations at Fort Jackson and then Fort Sam Houston.
I had special ed training in engineering, building boat bridges. I used to build small bridges and take them down. That way we build the bridge up so we could get over it. Then we would take it down so the enemy couldn't get over it. And then when we wanted to come back, we had to build a bridge then, and then take it down again. That's what we did.
And 4 months of medical training. And they taught you how to administer in the field. Belly shots, toes froze, rust bitten, how to take them off, pulling teeth, just about everything you needed an immediate thing. That would be field. It would be a medic, what they call a medic in the field. There's 4 medics to a platoon. Company rather. You had to go give shots right away, how to use pressure bandages to get hit in the stomach, how to put the pressure bandage on.
All kinds of things. When we got off, well, it was like something like a 26-hour flight or something. From here or from there to Ireland to Kuwait, and then we were in Kuwait for a few days, and then we jumped on a bus and and drove to like this green zone and then flew to where we were going to be staying. And you know, just even though you're in a friendly area, being Kuwait, you're still, you know, it's the Middle East, and everything looks like Iraq, everything sounds like Iraq, and you don't know, you've never been there before, so you're still a little, you know, a little vigilant there, a little, you know, looking out. And one time, you know, when we were on the way up there, at one point the bus that we were in decided to pull over to the side of the road, and we, you know, we got to use the bathroom, whatever, and so we're there, and we're just looking around, and you can see off, and it's got to be, you know, 1 o'clock in the morning or something like that, and it was pitch black. You can see off in the distance, you know, like the skyline of the houses and the huts out there, and a little bit of light, and you could hear like their language, and it was just like very, very shocking, you know, very eye-opening, because at that moment you say, oh boy, what are we getting into here? You know? So yeah, and given that it was a friendly, you know, area, we didn't have any ammo yet. So if, you know, God forbid, if something was to happen by some bad stroke of luck, we weren't prepared to defend ourselves. So that there was that thing in the back of our minds too. You know, we were in a very bad area for that time. You know, and then when we landed, and we're in the back of these, you know, open top trucks, and we can't see what's around us, we can't see where we're going, we can't see who's around us, and they're basically driving us around on base, you know, to the buildings we're going to stay in, or the tents we're going to stay in, and we can hear gunfire, we can hear, you know, mortars, we can hear their, you know, it was right up against the back of a city, and you could hear their stuff over the speakers, you know, their music. A few times, like in the 24-hour span, their music would play and their prayers would play, and just all those things was like sensory overload, you know, and you can't see what's going on, you know, so it's very anxiety-inducing, and just that feeling of not knowing what's to come, you know.
Long. The thing that sticks out the most was just being on the plane, going from here to there. I've always been a historically horrible sleeper. So everyone prior to it said, oh, stay awake for, you know, 48 hours, so you sleep the whole way there. That's not me, and I can't sleep well, so there was a lot of just twiddling my thumbs on the plane and just waiting to get there.
Were there a lot of nerves?
Yes and no. I was part of an all-male squadron. Women were not allowed to do the job that I had, so you kind of played it off, and to fit in with the group, you had to be that alpha male that kind of take on that wolf pack mentality. So even if you did have emotions, you didn't show them.
Couldn't believe I was going to war. You know, we were called up for a war conflict. My father joined the Navy, and he was never called to battle, so it's kind of scary, like, where are we going to be, you know, what's it going to be like, and it's like, you know, whenever you join the military, you always know that there's that potential for war, but you never really think that it's going to happen. So, as a medical personnel, you're always wondering, like, what am I going to see? Am I prepared enough? Did I prepare enough? You know, you never know what it's going to be like to have to really put training into reality.
It's something new, but it was a good nerve-wracking because I put in for those bases over there. I wanted to travel. That's one of the reasons why I joined. So it's that anticipation, that excitement, but fear of the unknown.
Going through my mind. You know, probably the main thing was fear of the unknown, knowing that you're going into, you know, Vietnam was all over the news and so forth, and it was, there was, you know, a lot of fear of the unknown.
I would say I was more excited and nervous.
One of our ships got sunk. We came in to New Caledonia, and well, our own mines, we didn't know. I mean, that the mines where they were detected in the channels, and so one of our ships went right into the mine. So going down, we lost all our equipment, our guns, everything. And, we couldn't even save our outfits because the first thing we did, we jumped in the water and thrive ashore.
Combat engineer, you know. So we were combat engineers, meaning, you know, playing around with C4 and blowing things up and that sort of thing. Combat engineer. What we were actually doing was route security and not outposts, they call them OPs, observation posts. We're doing observation post duty, route clearance, and route security. So that's basically, and then some of us were still doing the construction aspect of it, you know, by like a handful of people at a time, literally 5 or 6 people, while everybody else was going outside the wire and doing other things, you know. Once you're in there, you know, you could be anything. You could be a cook in the military. You could, you know, and once you get over there, everything changes. You just do whatever is needed, you know. So we were doing a lot of military police work, basically.
I was an aerial gunner. Every single night we flew. So being on a helicopter versus a plane, helicopters, the lower to the ground you are, the safer you are, and the faster you move. First mission was a DA, direct action. That's when we would deliver a element, usually a team, Army, Navy, whoever it was, our passengers, to complete their mission. So if they had to go and capture a high-value target, we were their taxi cab in. We kept them safe, and if they encouraged problems on the ground, we were there to suppress them from the air. So that was one mission. The other mission we had was a logistics run. So resupply bases with food, fuel, beans, letters from home, Christmas trees during the Christmas season, Easter eggs during the Easter season. So we did a very tough mission or a very rewarding mission, because the guys who were at these locations that were cut off from society, they needed their mail, they needed motivation to keep going, and we were delivering that to them.
Which one did you find more rewarding to you?
The direct action.
So I went to the first Desert Storm, Desert Shield conflict, which was in Kuwait and Iraq. The unit that I was attached to was the 129th Evacuation Hospital out of San Diego, and we went to Saudi Arabia and then later to Dubai, United Arab Emirates.
My next duty stations would be with the Army posts, with the Army units. I would move with them. If they needed bombs dropped on a target, I would do that. The unit's broken down by 4 operational platoons, so each platoon has a job. You might have escort duty, patrol duty and stuff. My platoon did a lot of patrolling at night.
I guess you would call it kind of like being a courier between the headquarters of which I was assigned to some of their subordinate units in and around the Saigon-Benoit area. So I spent the first 6 months pretty much traveling on the road, at least 2 or 3, well, at least twice a day. The second 6 months I spent at the headquarters, and a lot of that time was spent kind of like as a duty soldier, working on the perimeter, rolling barbed wire, refilling sandbags for, you know, bunkers and things of that nature, you know. And
build bridges and take them down. That's all you did all day long.
Well, I started as a gunner. We had these big guns, and they're called 105s. They shoot about 4 or 5 miles, and in front of us was the artillery. So whenever they wanted support from the artillery, if they were hugged down or there were some foxhole hold them down, they would direct fire from us. We would fire the guns, and maybe hit a foxhole, but anyway, we would shoot it over so that they could advance. So in other words, we were the umbrella, like, you know, we were shooting over them, but into the enemy lines. We had machetes, which were long knives like that, and we'd have to cut our way through to get through.
Well, we got shipped down to Brooke Army Medical Center in Texas. We had to deliver mail to a lot of these soldiers who were coming back, going up. In other words, they flew from Korea to Japan to San Francisco. San Francisco, they flew you to San Francisco, they flew you to Brooke County Medical Center. And there's always a medical with you, what they call a medical team. There's doctors, nurses, and what have you, when they're flying them in. We flew them in. And they go down to Brooke County Medical Center was basically mainly a burn center. In other words, you get hit by a mortar, what do they call it now? I forget what they call it. You get hit by I was just thinking of it a few minutes ago.
Some kind of like bomb device?
Napalm. Napalm. You heard of that?
I think so.
You just said it. That's what made me remember. Napalm bombs. It's like a gel. It gets on you. It'll burn your skin right off. And we were the center for that. And the doctors, the burn doctors, and what have you, nurses, knew how to handle that. And they ship them down to Brooke County Medical Center. And that's where they would end up until they get trained out. But some of them didn't even have a face. All they had was two holes for their nose and their eyes. And we had to, some of the guys had to deliver the mail to them. They couldn't read the mail because he didn't have any eyes. And that was awful. And then from the medic in the field, they took you, they had a couple of litter bearers. They'd pick up the guy that got wounded or whatever, and they'd carry him to an aid station, battalion aid station. And the battalion aid station would give him the first treatment. And after the battalion aid station, we were done with that, the helicopters were flying down to what they call a MASH unit. You've probably seen that on television.
Yeah.
The MASH unit, which stand, do you know what it stands for?
Mobile Army
Surgical
Hospital.
And they sent you there, and they give you a little more refined treatment there, surgery, whatever. Then they ship you to Japan. And from Japan, you got honorable when you get that far.
No, we didn't have I didn't have a day off until maybe we had been there maybe 9 months, 10 months, and then they switched the rotations outside on some of these, for those of us that were doing these posts. And basically that's stopping traffic, checking people, and making sure things are, you know, up to par. You don't see anybody stopping, burying bombs on the side of the road and stuff, which happened routinely, you know. So once we were 9, maybe even 10 months in, that far in, somebody had this great idea actually and switched our shifts to 24-hour shifts. So you would be out for 24 hours, come in for 24 hours, go outside for 24 hours. And then everybody would get a day off like once every 2 weeks. But then with the 24-hour shift plus the day off, it was like you had like 2.5 days off or something, it felt like, you know. Maybe even 3 days off, so it was like 48 hours, 24 hours on, 48 hours off every other week, so that was like a little bit of time, you know. But yeah, before that it was like 12-hour shifts, 12 hours on, 12 hours off, 12 hours on, you know. So, not much free time, you know. But then a little bit of free time that you do have, you kind of keep yourself busy. You know, I got into boxing. A friend of mine taught himself how to play the drums. One kid that was on our base did comedy, like in his spare time or whatever. So he would do like a comedy show or something. They play movies here and there in like one little room, but really it was one big room. MWR room, they call it, Military Wellness and Recreation, I believe. And that's basically all it was, you know. And if you weren't doing that, you were back, you know, in the barracks, which were these old Iraqi police buildings that were decrepit, and you know, just everybody had a little DVD player, a laptop, and those were the days before, out there anyways, internet wasn't really widely available. Some people had it, but it was still hard to come by, you know.
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense of you wake up and you work, and that's it. And when you're not at work, that's your free time. So a lot of mission planning gets done on the off hours. You know, you're always, you know, prepping your mind, prepping your body, working out, doing things like that. Distractions over there are minimal. You know, you don't have your cell phones, you don't really have your computers. You might watch a movie or two.
Yeah, underway I did. You know, you do the way the watch rotation set up. You have 6 hours of watch, and then you're off for 12 hours, and it just kind of repeats that way. So, depending on the job that you do and the things that you need to do off your watch, you know, you can have a lot of free time.
Free time, you do. So, like anything, you can't be ready all the time. So we used to do things in shifts. So some of my friends that I was really close with at the time had, like, you know, evening shifts or morning shifts, and then when you weren't working, you'd be riding home to family members or trying to make phone calls and make contact. But when we weren't, you know, working, and we played soccer and did, like, different, you know, intramural activities to kind of, like, you know, support bonds between the two countries.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. In basic training, your free time's always spent doing something. Tech school, you're always doing something like preparing your uniform, studying. But when you get to your duty station, you have the weekends off, depending. Your nights are off. The only time you didn't have any basic, really free time was like during exercises.
Not really. You know, you were pretty much, I mean, yeah, you were off duty, but that was pretty much to go back to where you were sleeping or whatever, and you had a few hours to yourself, and then you'd go to bed, and then you were up and you would be back at whatever you were doing the next day.
Except for in being in a war zone, yes. Yes, I found that there was, you know, we worked about 5.5 days a week. My first tour in Okinawa, you had, you know, the rest of the weekend off. You had evenings off pretty much.
No. We had not what we called free time. They would give us R&R, which would be rest and recreation. And from Guadalcanal, we went to New Zealand. And we would get, I forget how many days we were there, and then we would go back into action. And they did that to everybody. You know, they sent them out for R&R. And we went to New Zealand, which was a beautiful country. And we rested and geared up. Who was hurt, got fixed up. Who was malnutrition or to eating, they weren't eating what they were. They built them up. In other words, they try to get us back to fighting force, you know.
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah.
What did you do during it?
Free time?
Yeah.
Well, I used to play pool in the day room. I'm not bragging because I know a lot of guys get their fannies blown off, but they had a swimming pool in the back. I didn't go in the pool, but I don't think I went in once or twice all the time I was there. I used to like to make model airplanes. I built a couple of them, and we used to challenge each other because there was nothing else to do. We bought the kits, we put them together, flew them. It was fun. Then I played football. Played football a little bit. Got beat up. But, we won the MFS title. Football.
A lot of us still keep in touch, you know, even if it's not all the time. When we do, we just pick right back up where we left off, you know. And that's the advantage, I think, about that National Guard as opposed to, you know, the active Army or what have you, is you guys all come from the same place, more or less, you know. So when you go through an experience like that, which a lot of it was very traumatic, you know, you come back, you still have each other to lean on. You're back, you're in the same home state, you know. So I think that's like such a positive thing and a good way to look at, you know, the National Guard. You still have a support system in place, you know, if you need it, you know, rather than being, you know, stationed in Hawaii with somewhere, with, you know, another company or something, and then coming back and everybody you were with is from all over the place, you know.
Different. Not different in a bad way, but because you go through so much and you're all trained to do one certain thing, and again, since a lot of the emotions are left out of it, you get right to the core of what the friendship is and having each other's backs, and you're there with each other for the good news of, hey, you just found out you were pregnant, great, congratulations, or hey, I just heard that your father passed away, I'm sorry, that sucks. And really just kind of navigating it, and it's all in a compressed time frame too. Whereas stateside, you have a friend that you've had for 20 plus years, you build that up over time. But when you're with the deployed setting, you have a lot more of those hurdles and greater impact conversations over a short span of time.
You're with people you'd probably never be friends with, but you leave or you graduate feeling closer than you've ever felt with your peers.
Submarines are, you know, they're pretty tight-knit groups. You know, you're underwater for long stretches of time, you know, with these folks, and you have to interact with them. But you actually get to the point where, at the end of the day, you know, when you're pulling into port and you work a whole day, you'll sit there for an hour or two at the end of the day just talking with them, even though you spent all day with them, you spent a deployment with them, because you get so used to them being there. It's kind of like your family. You know, one of them was, you know, one of my friends, you know, he's my best man at my wedding, and I keep contact with my old captain.
You become like a family. It's you get along, just like the dysfunctional family. Some of the guys I've been to Iraq with are closer than my own family members.
Oh yeah, you developed friendships while you were there. The problem is you all came and went at different times, so unless you really made an effort afterwards, many of us, at least from my particular case, you didn't stay in touch with, you know, folks. You kind of wanted that end, that period or whatever of your life to go away, and so you know, in many instances you just came home and you went over by yourself, you came home by yourself.
One thing in the Army, you make friends because you took care of each other. You were one big, in other words, if anything happened, you were taking care of, it's automatic. In other words, you took care of each other, and that's what you did. Everybody was a buddy, you know, no matter who. Even if you didn't know his name, you was buddy.
We were buddy. You had to be, because you slept with them, you ate with them, you fought with them, and you were shoulder to shoulder. You were buddy. I was closer to, you know, maybe if they had a cousin or a brother, slept together. We had to sleep together in the foxholes or whatever it was. We were always together. Or you had to be. We couldn't far away too much, because then now we would be alone. Whereas we stood to that, get together, we knew where we were and what we had to do. And I still keep in touch with 5 or 6 of them. We're still together.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I just try not to call too much. You know, maybe every 3 days or something, rather than every. I mean, some guys are a little ridiculous. You know, every waking minute. You know, but you still, you know, my family and my friends, they are under the assumption that, you know, you hear the cliche, no news is good news. You know, so if they didn't hear from me, that means you know, nothing has happened. Yeah. You know.
I opted not to. I would send the occasional letters or the occasional emails, but for the most part, the less communication with them I had back here, the better and more effective I was at my job over there. So yes, if something big happened, I'd want to know about it, but going to little Susie's birthday party, I didn't really want to hear about that, because I didn't want the fact of knowing that I missed it to play a role. I just wanted to focus on what I was doing and how I did it.
Well, at that time we were able to do email, so that's just when we were starting to be able to do email from submarines. So yeah, you could do a couple emails a week or so like that way. Or you could still do mail, but you'd have to wait to pull in the port for that.
Mm.
So whatever money the Army was paying me, I was essentially buying phone cards to try to reach people at home.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because it's scary.
Yeah.
I remember my parents, that they didn't have a lot of contact, and this was before email and everything else, where they essentially, would watch CNN, and that was their only connection to what was going on, not knowing, where my unit was or how we were or if we were sustaining casualties or anything. So.
Mm-hmm.
We had, they call it MWR, Morale, Welfare, Recreation.
Mm-hmm.
They had a phone system where you go, put your name on the list, they'll dial the number for you, and however how many minutes you talk to your family, you just pay them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a cheaper way instead of calling collect.
Yeah.
So I'd call like on holidays, once a month, see how things were going. Write every now and then. I'm not a big writer of letters, but yeah, still did it.
Through cards and letters, and in those days we had little tape recorders, and you try to keep the tape recorder, the machine, close to you as much as possible. And throughout the day, you could say different things, on the tape, and once you filled the tape up, you would send them home, and folks at home would do the same thing, so you could hear each other's voices and communicate that way rather than just in writing and in letters. Unfortunately, that stuff was very expensive from what I can remember, and so you wound up reusing the tapes. So you wound up taping over everything. Mm-hmm. So I still have a couple of the tapes at home. I have to have them. I've often wondered what's on the tapes, and I've thought of taking them somewhere and getting them professionally transferred from the tapes onto a CD or something, and then hearing what's on them. Mm-hmm. But I think I still have 2 of those at home.
Actually, I did in later years of my career. I was in the Marine Corps for over 27-year period with broken time along the way, and I would say that yes, in later years I did, but in earlier years I had hardly any contact at all.
Did you decide not to, or you just couldn't find time to?
I pretty much didn't take the time.
Well, by mail, that's it. Mm-hmm. Phone calls were maybe just on weekends, on Saturdays, that's it. Because there was no phones. Mm-hmm. You had one phone in the barracks, and they would shut that off until the weekends. They didn't want you using the phone. Couldn't want anybody calling home or telling them what you were doing and stuff like that. There was a war going on. Didn't want you saying anything to anybody.
No, just by letters. We wrote them by letters, and before I left for overseas, I told my family all my starting alphabet. In other words, I would say, like I was going to my fiancée, I would write, "Dear Dell." And then if I was in Alamonas, I would start the first paragraph with A. Then what I had to say in there. Then the second paragraph would be like an M. And so they could put all those things and knew just where I was all during the war. Whereas these officers would read our letters, and if anybody put in there where they were, they would cut them out. So their families never knew where they were, but my whole family knew where I was.
My mother used to get mad because I didn't write too much. We were always doing something in the service. But she, one time, when I went down to Virginia, Camp Pickett, she got so mad that I wasn't writing a letter. She called my CO, the captain of the battalion or whatever it was. And she got so mad she called him up and says, "I want you to tell my son to call me. Call me. Don't write a letter because he doesn't write letters." So the CO called me in and he told me, he says, "I don't want to hear this anymore. Mother's calling up to find out why you're not writing letters." But I wrote letters as much as I could. When I got down in Texas, I was behind the desk a lot. And I used to type out a quick one now and then.
It was warm, actually. everybody was pretty supportive. I ran into a lot of people, and I'm not, and there are people that exist, but I'm not one of them that walk around in uniform all the time and act like they crave that attention and they want that recognition, you know. And I'm very humble and reserved, and I don't need any of that. But still, when I would see people, one lady, I was trying to rent a car, and I was in my uniform in Enterprise, I think it was, and she stepped in and paid my rental car for me, and got like upgraded it and paid for it right then and there, and said thank you for your service, you know, and you know, little things like that, and that was like, you know, the first few days you're home, you know, but initially getting off the plane to all our families and stuff, first of all, very emotional, you know, and you know, all the congressmen and senators and stuff, they're all there shaking your hand and saying congratulations, you know, and it's good to know that we're appreciated, you know, and to know that our sacrifices were appreciated, but it's also it's good to see that, because anybody can say that, you know, but then when they're actually there shaking your hand, actually taking time out of their day to thank you, you know, and to recognize your sacrifices, it means a lot, you know. My best friend, who was there with me, and we were friends before, we were friends in the National Guard, we were friends over there, and we were always together hanging out. He was teaching me how to box, how I said I took up boxing and stuff for a little bit. He got blown up and suffered 3rd-degree burns, head to toe, broke his ankle, not his leg, and had a traumatic brain injury. It was like a big deal, you know. And him and another friend of mine who were together, and we had made that trip before, me and my friend, and we just made it a couple days prior actually. And then I got the word that he was, you know, hurt, and I was out on a 24-hour shift, of course, and there's, you know, talk about helpless, there's nothing I can do about it. I can't see him, I can't try to comfort him, I can't call his mom, I can't do anything except sit there and, you know, let all this try to sink in, you know, which I thought it was like someone just playing a joke when they were telling me at first, you know. So then when I went in and seen him, I came in and I went over across, and he was in the hospital still, looking like Freddy Krueger, you know. And so obviously me and his cousin and a couple other people put him on the back of a C-130. It's like a plane, and he flew to Germany, and then he ended up in a burn center in San Antonio, Texas for a few years. So his, you know, it's hard for me to talk about this experience without bringing him up, you know, because I could just imagine, you know, with how hard it was transitioning for me, you know. We got that warm reception. We got, people cared, you know, and thanked us and stuff. And he was left behind recovering from injuries in Texas, and people forgot about him. You know, he didn't get that same acknowledgement. He didn't get that same warm reception. He didn't, you know. So I could only imagine how tough it must have been for him. And we've talked about it a little bit. We're still very close to this day. I just talked to him yesterday. But you know, there's things like that where, you know, I could just imagine that his transition, because his experience is different, you know, from just mine or anybody else's anyway. And I could just imagine what it's like for someone like that, with like actual, you know, everybody's got problems, everybody's got a story, everybody's got issues, but his, you know, needs to be, I feel like, he got a Purple Heart when he was in Texas from the president at the time. So I guess that's a little recognition, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is, you know, that there's certain things just being in that, you know, you figure when you become a victim of that magnitude, that people around you should go even more out of their way to be supportive and empathetic, you know, and that's not necessarily all the case, always the case, you know. So there's that.
It was nice, a really welcoming reception. It was difficult, I think, from different conflicts that Americans and the U.S. have been in the past. The U.S. at the time hadn't been in any major conflicts at the time. So it was nice to come home and to see all the yellow ribbons everywhere, and it was nice to see friends and family again. Because it was a time, you know, at the time I was like 18, but I remember like how unified the country was, and it was really nice. So
it was good. We had a big group of people waiting, you know. But that was like one of the first, like we were, us, the battalion, and the 119th. We were the first ones to be deployed over. So we got the biggest reception when we came home, of course, you know. So all the politicians and all that kind of stuff. So.
Well, it wasn't a very friendly, you know, you hear different stories and so forth about Vietnam veterans being, you know, spit upon and things of that nature. I never experienced anything like that, but I did experience, you know, I can remember coming home on leave after I came back from Vietnam, and in those days you traveled in your uniform, and I can remember flying from Fort Lewis, Washington back home to Philadelphia, and stopping off at Chicago Airport to change planes. And I remember, you know, the looks and the people talking and so forth, you know. So you heard stories, so you could imagine, you know, you could imagine what they might have been saying and so forth. But I never experienced some of the things some of the other folks have said they've experienced. I'm not saying they haven't experienced those things, but you know, you tried to blend back into society as quickly as possible, and didn't really bring up the fact that you were a Vietnam veteran unless you were talking to other Vietnam veterans.
Beautifully. Parties, every weekend, because people, like I was away nearly 3 years, so they would come over and say, we're coming over, and we'll have a party. And then I saw all my cousins, and all new cousins, or you know, a couple of them had babies, we saw the babies, so it was beautiful. And the only thing that was bad is we couldn't buy any clothes. There was no clothes to buy. So they had one gray outfit clothes that if anybody saw us, and I saw the other fellow, I know he was in service, because he's got the same jacket I got on. Because we didn't have too much clothes to buy.
I say it was very hard. It's just like I said, even going in there was a big culture shock. You know, you do a lot of growing up fast while you're there, or we did anyways. You know, I don't want to speak about anybody else's experience. But basically, you're used to a different mindset, you know, and you're used to, you know, if you hear a noise, that could kill you. You know, what was that? Where did it come from? You know, if somebody drives too close to you, you know what I mean? It's just a whole different. There's countless examples. But it takes a little time to realize people are gonna make noises. People are gonna pop balloons at birthday parties. People are, you know what I mean? And it's not their problem for doing it in front of you. It's your, you know, you've got to deal with this new, a new way of life, this normal way of life, you know? So yeah, and I think I can speak for more than myself that, yeah, it takes a little bit of, endurance, you know? Came home on leave around Christmas time. I had been there for about 6 months, give or take, and I came home for 14 days for Christmas and New Year's. And I remember distinctly, you don't realize how in the groove and how used to things you are. And then when I came home and I had to go to Target the first night I was back to get like a DVD player or something, you know. And I went and I was just taken back by the vibrant colors of clothes, and you know, all the red really sticks out in my mind, you know, because, you know, Target and red and their uniforms and their registers and all this stuff, and it's like, wow, it kind of, you gain an appreciation, you know, for what you do have here, you know, and then it was back to, you know, green and brown.
It was a little bit hard. I had a harder time going from the stress of my position on the submarine to going from that to shore duty. You know, after I got done with my 4 years on the 4.5 years on the boat, I went to be an instructor, at sub school, and that was harder because I didn't have the responsibilities that I had before, and it was difficult going from a very high stress, high responsibility environment to something that was there's really no expectations for you to do. You kind of go from being at that high up on the totem pole to being, you know, initially I was a student again, you know, where you don't have any responsibilities really. That was really difficult for me, and I think going through that while I was still in the Navy helped me transition to civilian life after that, because if I would have went from the boat to civilian life, it would have been a lot harder to do that. Because even when I went from the Navy into college, it was a lot different, being around students that were younger than me but also didn't have any kind of world experience.
Easier then, I would have to say. It takes a little transition because when you're in the military, you wear a uniform, and it's a military life when you're doing active duty. But I came back as a reservist, so a typical reserve soldier's duty would be 2 days a month and then 2 weeks during the summer. So when I came back, I was already ready to go to university in San Diego, so it was, you know, nice to be back, but it was also easy because I knew that my life wasn't going to be all military and that I would be a college student, you know, 28 days out of the month, and then one weekend I would, you know, drill with my Army unit.
Yeah. Yeah. It's different. So you live like an animal for a while. Like, I'd noticed myself driving, looking for ambush. Oh, there's something in the road. Let me move over here. You feel like you're on guard all the time. Like, you're hyper-vigilant. You hear a noise, what's that? Stuff like that. So, it changes you.
No, because I had my, see, they kept your job when you came back. So when I came back, I went right back to my printing job. And they saved it for me. So today they don't do that. Today, you're out of work for a month or a year, you don't get your job back.
I never had a problem when I would go on orders and I would deploy. That was never a problem. The problem was always when I came back. Couldn't turn the switch off.
And you were doing that a lot, so.
And I was doing it a lot, but then gradually, over time, with some help and some counseling, I actually, in the late 90s, by that time, the adjustments coming back wasn't that difficult.
I'd say it definitely affected me in a positive way for a number of reasons. When I was there in Iraq, I always told myself and told other people I was around too, like, there were guys I was there with who, you know, they were leaving a wife, kids, and stuff behind, you know, to go there and do that. That's their duty. That's what they swore an oath to do, and that, you know, and that's fine. But like me at the time, being in my early 20s, you know, I was single. It was just me, you know. I had nothing to worry about. Not that you know, it would be any less significant if something was to happen to me or anything, you know. But just that extra potential heartache or something. Like I felt for these guys that had their whole family back at home. They're going through things. Their kids having their first day of school, or, you know, or starting to walk and they're missing it, you know. So I kind of took that as a positive. Like, hey, I'm making decent money being here. It's all tax free. I have not, like, I don't have all this other baggage, you know, that everybody else seems to have. So that kind of, like, I put that positive spin on it. Excuse me, to get myself through it a little bit, I think, you know, a little bit of a coping mechanism. But as far as after it, my experiences are unique, and I use them into, I work here now, you know, and I always wanted to, once I got out and did all that, and I seen different things that friends were there with me, you know, were dealing with, you know. I want to give back to veterans. I want to help veterans. I want to. It's like a passion, a true something I want to do. You know, so so I would never have reached that realization if I didn't go through the things I did go through. You know what I mean? So everything happens for a reason, as far as I'm concerned, And you know, all these things I went through in Iraq and military and stuff got me to this point here, you know, and helped me to realize what I want to do with my life, really.
It just gave me a better worldview, not just as an American, but seeing how different countries operate. So we did a lot of work with other forces, other UN forces, and just seeing how they operated, how they lived, how they communicated.
I think it really gave me an appreciation for the love of the country. You know, it's nice to, you know, war is never pleasant per se, but I think it really truly makes you feel blessed and lucky for the country that you represent, and it's such an honor to be an American, you know, for a lot of the liberties that we sustain and fight for. It's always, you know, extremely rewarding to be able to know that that's the country that you represent, and it really gives you an appreciation for your home when you wear a uniform representing it.
And when you came out, you were a different person. You were like a man. Before you went in as a teenager. But when you come out, you respected everybody, you knew everybody, and you took over. You could live by yourself afterwards.
I learned all kinds of stuff from being in the service. I keep a clean home. I wouldn't say I'm borderline OCD or anything, but you learn all kinds of stuff in the military. You learn, probably the biggest one is adaptability, you know, perseverance. Whatever happens in your life, there's a bigger problem someone else has somewhere, so just deal with your stuff and, you know, adapt and overcome is what they say, you know. And it's a pretty decent motto to live by, you know. On top of that, I mean, just discipline. That's a big one, you know, and sometimes I'm frustrated by non-military people who don't have that experience, who aren't as disciplined when it comes to certain things, whatever. Excuse me. And you know, you just kind of I just kind of realized, like, hey, you know, everybody's got that life experience, you know, and you are the way you are because of, you know, decisions you made in the past, and the military will make you more regimented a little bit, and definitely more disciplined. Now it's a good thing. I definitely think it's a good thing, and but you won't catch me, you know, scratching my gut eating pizza, you know what I mean, like sitting down watching TV all weekend. I feel like I have to be productive. I have to always go. I have to be in the gym or doing something or experiencing life in some way, you know.
I learned a lot about, you know, how we are as humans, our interactions with people, that, you know, even though we weren't in the U.S., that we were still very, very, you know, dignified, and we were scared like they were scared, but, you know, ultimately it's a job, so, you know, you try to do the job the best that you can, and, you know, being part of the medical aspect of the military, it's really, it's, you know, it's a very humbling experience, but also a very educational one.
You know what? It's like you learn that if you can. When I was telling you earlier about doing the job, you learn if you can do your job. So I learned I can do my job. You know, I did all right. So came home alive.
Well, I tell you, it made you more responsible and made you respect people more. Like you took care of people more. I mean, if you didn't know them, if you seen something was going on, you go over there and you protect them. And
just basically appreciate what you have. Be grateful for what you have. And just living with integrity.